Yeah, I've done live replay on a Champions League final. Very, very, very pressure environment, as you can probably imagine. It was. I don't often get nervous nowadays, but I remember walking onto that rig and that day, and the game kicked off. And as soon as that game kicked off, I could feel like the sweat just sliding a little bit, because you only get one shot for this, and if you miss it, you've missed it, right? You're too late. That's the way live replay works. But yeah, that was a big one, working on the Champions League final. Yeah, my name's Bryan Davies. I'm a solutions architect from a company called Ross Video. We designed a lot of the equipment that is in the Confetti X arena here, and the reason I got involved with Confetti was 6 months ago I came to do the initial training with the guys and to teach them how to use all of the equipment in there. And it was a really, really good time, really enjoyed it. For the students, they probably won't appreciate just what they've got there, because it's all new and shiny to them, but as someone who has worked in live events and broadcasting for 12 years, I go back to when I was a student, and the equipment and facilities I had to learn this industry doesn't stand up to that. It's an opportunity. If the students were smart, and I hope they are, and they could walk into a number of positions from this, in terms of vision mixing, replay operating, lighting. So it's all in there. They can learn an entire broadcast studio production from within that room.
You're not going to get better than that, are you?
You don't. Not in the UK especially. I mean, that is top of the range. And I said this when I was doing my training last year, like, this isn't the cheap level of equipment that the guys have got in there. That is a fully bespoke studio that the BBC could walk into now and use for a production. ITV could, Sky Sports, all of them could, and they do it. You're not going to get better. Not to learn in that is just an opportunity that they should just be taking and grasping with both hands. People will know if someone says on their CV, "Oh, I went to Confetti X, I went to Nottingham-Trent, and I've done an esports course." They will know what they've used because of that, just having that name and brand. I've been involved in some fantastic projects while I've worked for Ross Video, one of them being the Confetti one here. But I'll probably say that the biggest one that I've done, and the one that I was sort of blown me away, is I actually went over to the Royal Omani Opera House, and I had to direct the Royal Omani Orchestra in a production, and then teach the guys who were there how to also direct, call the cameras and things. And that was quite mind-blowing, that I was in this huge opera house in the middle of Oman, teaching people how to cut cameras, and it was fascinating. It was a different world, to be honest, but I've got the clip of that at home. I've got some photos I'm going to be showing the guys later. I've got a short little video to show of it. But I remember being on that flight home going, that was good. That was really impressive.
First class?
No, unfortunately not. But hey, one thing I will say is no one flies first class at Ross. You know, even the big bosses, we all have the same level of respect for that regard, and we would just fly what we need to fly. There was nothing like Industry Week when I was around, but I wish there was, because sometimes I think when you're in university, you can sometimes get tunnel vision on the goals, and you don't. Sometimes it might seem like a bit of a fairy tale that people actually get a job out of this and work and so on and so forth. Whereas now, in a week like this, you've got a variety of people across the board telling their experiences, their stories, to try and motivate and encourage these people for their future. And again, we didn't have that, and it's a perfect thing. I think it's really good for the students, and we're happy to be here. How can you argue with that, right? Just to manage to pick how many records have Faithful sold over the years. Right, and then someone can go and ask them questions. It's the same thing. It's amazing. It's a really good experience. I only graduated 12 years ago. I'm 34 now, so I like to think that the students might look at me and go, he's not a really old man who's been doing this for 50 years. And I've done a lot in my 12 years, which is why I'm here to sort of explain my story and sort of explain the pathway I took to get where I am now. And I think when I do my session, the guys will understand that it's not out of the realms of possibility. You know, I started off pulling cables and setting up cameras like a lot of the guys here doing now, and now I design multi-million-pound studios, and that is my job. So it's a tangible target, and I'd like to think that people might look at me and go, well, if he can do it, then I certainly can. And that's why I'm here. We need young people in this industry. It's an industry that is ever changing. And generationally, I think we're in that shift right now of the old guard are probably starting to retire and all the rest of it, and the guys learning this new technology that they've got in Confetti will be able to just walk into a job and be sponges, so to speak, with all the new knowledge that they'll have. Whatever opportunities present themselves, you need to take. It is a tough industry to break into, and unfortunately there's a lot of people who do take advantage of students and their ability to want to do things, especially when it comes to cost. I would always say value your own time more than anything. Don't let people exploit you, which unfortunately people do try. But especially learning this equipment, I mean, I'm here from an equipment point of view. Spend as much time as you can hands-on with that equipment, because if you get your head around it, you could walk out of here and say, I've directed live esports championships, and straight away you're going to get put to the top of the list. The key thing is to know the difference between experience and exploitation. I think once you're turning up to a shoot and not being told what to do, or you don't need advice, and you just, for example, setting up a camera, filming an interview, and then going home at night, that you're not there for experience, you're there because you've shot the show. That's when an invoice should be going in. If you don't know how to turn the camera on, don't know how to focus, and you're asking a senior person for that advice, that's experience. That's the difference in the two. When you can confidently say you've left that job and gone, I actually didn't need help to do that, you're no longer there for the experience, you're there to be paid. The one piece of equipment I think I would say I couldn't live without, depends on what I'm doing on the production. I've done a variety of different roles in most productions, but I think I'm more towards the vision mixing production switcher side of things now, which I think is the most important part of any production, right? Because it's what changes the cameras, it's what brings your graphics on screen, it's what cuts your replays to air. Without that, you couldn't have a production. Especially with the Ross vision mixer we've got in Confetti here, it can actually control 5 or 6 different bits of equipment from it, so it's essentially the central piece of equipment in the workflow. I find it really hard because I'm a big football fan, so sometimes it's hard to not get too engrossed watching the game because you're there to actually do a job. Because obviously from where I sit, I'm seeing 22 different camera angles of the one game rather than sitting at home and watching what the viewer sees. So sometimes you have to have that self-containment to actually establish that, hey, I'm not here to watch the match, I'm here to do live replays. Well, I think the Qatar World Cup had a lot of AR stuff on the phones, didn't it? I'm not sure if you saw that, where they essentially, people could have their phones and it would give you a view of the match with stats popping up on the screen and stuff. So there's a lot of demand at the minute to make the user experience, the consumer experience better. Whereas I'm a bit of a traditionalist. When I go to the football, I go to watch the football and I watch it in person. But you mentioned about the cameras hanging from the stadium and stuff. We actually own that company. So the company I work for, Ross Video, owns SpiderCam. So I've seen that from the other side of the rails, right? I've been seeing how long them things take to set up and de-rig and how they're controlled, and again, it's all fascinating. Of course, yeah. I mean, I'm a big advocate of the youth is the future, right? And in 30, 40 years' time, I'll hopefully be retiring and looking back and having people who I spoke to at these events be in my position, passing down their knowledge. I met some people when I graduated a long time ago who were less than helpful and saw youth as a threat, and I'm very much against that. I think I've got kids. I want them to be able to get in the industry one day, or whether it's this or any industry, and rely on the senior people for advice and words. And the more we can do things like this to help promote that, then absolutely. My first job out of uni was in London. I was down at Bloomberg Television as a studio engineer for a few years. I'm from Manchester, born and raised, so it was a bit of a culture shock going down there and living in an 8-person house share in Walthamstow. And before Walthamstow was trendy, by the way, it's quite a nice place to live nowadays, but it's still very much seen as the centre of the broadcasting and live production world, just because it's where it's historically always been. I know we've had things like Media City in Manchester, but I think generally London will always be the hub of this industry. I think it's a great city. It's a great city. There's a lot of people there. There's a lot of potential there. There's no reason not to have a campus there, and it will only help everyone grow.